multidão, realizing just transitions. Welcome to the German Climate Pavilion at COP30 in Bali.
Good afternoon, and I appreciate everyone being here, even though it's a bit hot, if I may say. And so thank you everyone for coming here to learn about leveraging climate finance, rainforests at the heart of transformation. I'm from the Green Climate Fund. My name is Kristin Lang, and I'm the Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, and I have the pleasure to moderate today. And we're going to start off with opening remarks from Ms. Ingrid-Gabriela Hoven, who's the Managing Director at GIZ. So if you could please come up. Thank you.
Yeah, well, good afternoon. Welcome, dear friends, colleagues, international organizations. Yeah, apparently yesterday I was at an evening event, and there was from a Brazilian side, and it was said, I mean, possibly the heat that we are experiencing within rooms gives us a little bit of a flavor of what we can expect if we don't act. So I take this positively in this sense. Okay. We want to deal in this event with a very important topic, and this is about climate protection, and we would like to share with you some significant milestones. And forest protection has been very close to my work for many years, and being here at COP30 in Belém at the heart of the Amazon rainforest is an important symbol, I think, to demonstrate what forest protection means for climate action, but at the same time, and you're going to see this as well, what it means actually for local livelihoods and people. Because this is also a people's COP. This event focuses on the history of forest conservation in Laos, a very important forest country dedicating its forests to climate protection. GIZ is a long-standing partner of the government of Laos and supports its efforts to reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. I'm therefore delighted to present a project implementing Laos' emission reductions program through sustainable forest management today here at COP30. This Laos project was one of the first project that GIZ implemented, which was co-financed by the GCF. It was now selected by GCF as one of the 10 projects celebrating 10 years of climate impact, so it's a very good one. The last project demonstrates how different climate financing mechanisms in the forest sector can complement each other in an ideal way. In the mid-60s and 70s, 70% of the national territory was under forest cover. Today, the figure is just 58%. Slash and burn practices linked to agricultural production was one of the main drivers. And I would like to refer actually to a young woman living in Hoven. one of the poorest regions in Laos. She is the mother of 5 children, and actually we are going a little bit to deal with her concrete situation. Tong Yang and her husband used to earn an income mainly from growing dry rice. On account of the hilly landscape that we see here in the picture, Tong Yang had to regularly find new fields, and this included clearing patches of forest herself to make space to grow her rice. But that's in the past now. The Laos project has helped her to create an alternative. With the black plastic bucket full of pig feed, you can see Tong Yang walks the 2 kilometers to a slope where she used to grow her rice. The plot is now fenced in and is home to chickens and pigs. In other villages in Hoa Farm, the project successfully introduced tea farming and other alternative options as the foundation of the local economy. Along with others from the village, Tong Yang has been trained by agricultural experts from GIZ and the local forestry authority on raising animals in the medicines and vaccines they need and how to plant grass for fodder. She says her income is now considerably higher from selling the mature animals than from when she grew rice. In good months, she can even put aside the equivalent of several hundred euros. The fact that Tong Yang is no longer forced to destroy the forest in order to clear land of new rice fields is a step in the right direction for the farmer herself and for the environment. Tong Yang has clarity regarding who is responsible for which tracts of land and how the areas can be used. A satellite image on an information board at the entrance of the village precisely delineates the forest boundaries, indicating where slash and burn practices are prohibited. So let us go perhaps to the next slide. I'm coming slowly to an end. Ladies and gentlemen, bold plans of the Lao government to reduce its forest emissions were supported by the World Bank's FCPF and REDD+ readiness component. Laos could convincingly work towards verified reduction of up to 8.5 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions in northern Laos. To honor this major achievement, they signed the Emissions Reduction Payment Agreement, IRPA, with the Carbon Fund of the World Bank in 2021. The implementation of the emissions reduction program aims to address the drivers and underlying causes of forest loss in a third of national territories of Laos. To succeed in this endeavor, the Lao government needed a strong and reliable partner. GIZ supported the Department of Forestry to develop a funding proposal to the Green Climate Fund to implement the Lao emissions reductions program. And the Lao PDR implementation of the emissions reduction programs through improved governance and sustainable forest landscape management project. In short, the Lao project was approved by the board of the GCF in 2020. And it addresses the forest loss through participatory land use planning, sustainable livelihoods, and performance-based finance. The project is really huge. Almost 600 villages benefit from this endeavor and has a lasting impact on 1/3 of Laos forest cover. And it reaches more than 250,000 people. Over half of them are women. So by increasing on the land that is already used for dry rice farming, by increasing the productivity through other income sources, actually the pressure now on villages to extend the dry rice farming has been decreased tremendously. Let me close by saying, and we are going to have more insights on this specific program, When you look at it a little bit more from a general perspective, you can see that it has been successful. Why? Because we have built partnerships with the World Bank, with the German government, with actually the Lao government. Additionally, we have actually made sure that we get the right incentive system in place through especially the Red Plus system. But additionally, with respect to the GCF funding, it was actually so instrumental to go through the public funding mechanism. So not funding something in parallel, but really by doing so and working through the national system, we actually also strengthen national authorities and entities that are now accredited with the GCF. So these are win-win opportunities. We incentivize actually sustainable land use practices. At the same time, we encourage partnerships, and at the same time, we strengthen the respective governance system in Laos. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to hopefully a very inspiring discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'd like to introduce the panel, and thank you, Ingrid, for that presentation. First of all, Ingrid, don't sit down, come back up. I know it's quite hot to go up and down, but if you could come back and join us. We have some questions to go more in detail about the project and the lessons learned. Then, if I could have Valerie Hickey, of the Global Director for Climate Change at the World Bank, come up. And lastly, if we could have Endah Kurniawaty come up, the Director of Fundraising and Fund Development of the Indonesian Environmental Fund and the Ministry of Finance of Indonesia. Thank you very much. Mr., and apologies if I'm going to be murdering the name, Odumet, the Deputy Director and Department of Climate Change at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of Laos, intended to attend this event, and he sends his regrets, but he had some flight issues, and we were talking about that just now, about the flight issues, and so he is unable to be with us for reasons outside his control. He has asked us to convey his sincere apologies for not being able to attend in person and express deep appreciation for the participants. So I'd like to start with a question to GI said. As a technical and implementing partner, what are the key lessons learned in scaling up impacts in forest conservation, restoration, and sustainable land use? And what are the main gaps and challenges that were encountered in the project implementation?
Thank you so much. Lessons learned. I think the project is really a best practice when it comes to donor coordination. Sometimes you see that, especially when it goes to nature conservation projects, that perhaps piecemeal approaches are being pursued, but this, so you have like patches of activities, but you don't get to a scale that is really needed. So donor coordination was key, and also I think it was a combination between technical assistance that would strengthen the capacity and the response by farmers. I could come back to it, what does this mean in practice? And of course, the financial potential by the World Bank, by the existing forest conservation schemes, as well as from the GCF. Second point is certainly, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, is creating this enabling environment. And the fact that the funds were challenged through the Environment Protection Fund, we measured this as, we saw this as had a positive impact on the capacity of institutions in Laos. And this is also very important because this gives, for future applications and future activities, I think this creates trust and creates confidence of national authorities to stay engaged and to continue to stay engaged. And this is also very, very important. And I would like to applaud at this point that the EDF is a direct access entity. Wonderful example that this can function, because we know all the debate about this. So wonderful. And third, I consider this as an important piece by working together. When I see the numbers and the time frame, we really reach a certain scale. I think this is also important because then when you actually work at scale with many villages, you have a certain percentage of the country's cover. I think then it's easier to see that you really move the needle into the right direction. And this again encourages policymakers. It's worthwhile to continue to do so. No? So if piecemeal approaches often have the handicap that you don't see that really you're making a difference, and then people get perhaps impatient. There is always pressure perhaps to change policies again, but if you operate at such a scale, it's really much more difficult to say, I turn the needle back into a different direction. So let's close with those three issues.
Thank you, and you've just made the case for why paradigm shift is important when we're considering projects. So, I mean, you really did move the needle with that project. I'd like Valerie from the World Bank, if you could just, comment a bit on the lessons that were just mentioned from the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility experience, and what with the readiness that you use, how that also contributed to being prepared for the carbon credit payment for Laos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristin, and it's wonderful to be sitting here in the German pavilion talking about Lao PDR and other examples, because to be honest, without the genius of Germany and the generosity of the German people, there would be a lot less forests across this world, because Germany has been very thoughtful about thinking about the capital stack. It's the donor coordination and the capital coordination. And by that I mean linking money up. Because one of the challenges we have in the forest sector is that we've tended to have a boom and bust cycle of financing, where a project comes in, it's project dependent, it's a great project, it lasts for 3 years, then the money goes away, everything reverses, just as you said, Ingrid. 5 years later, another project comes in, and nothing moves. And for the people like Yong Yang, I think, forgive me if I'm getting the lady's name wrong, they can't be dependent on a project maybe happening. They need to see those measurable results. So it's this idea of having a coordinated capital stack that reflects not just donor coordination, but country ownership. Indonesia has done a fabulous job at identifying what it wanted and then plugging in the right finance. And this is what Lao PDR did. It thought about how do we make sure there is money for readiness and preparation. And a lot of this has to do with just thinking about that pipeline of supply for someone to invest in. And then Germany came in with GCF to really think about how do you fit what we always call the missing middle in forest carbon. Who's going to pay for people to change their activities from slash and burn to intensive agriculture? And that missing middle was provided by GCF, implemented through GIZ, with the coordination of the Lao government, and done really well. And the thing that made it easier to do it was not that it was one project, but that it had been preceded by a readiness project supported by FCPF, including the German government and others, so that there was an off-take agreement, so that if everybody in Lao did what they needed to do from the policy perspective on the government side to the individual actions of individual community members, somebody was sitting on the sidelines contractually obliged to buy the carbon emissions reductions that resulted. So this capital stack is a lesson that for us is really, really important and has been a fantastic lesson learned in Lao PDR. In other countries like Indonesia, and where we do it, things work. The second thing we've really learned, I think, is that infrastructure matters, particularly two parts of the infrastructure. Ingrid talked a lot about the policy infrastructure, that's important, but social infrastructure matters. At the end of the day, we're all doing this because we care about the farmers having more measurable income. They have a savings account for a couple of €100 every month. That means you need social infrastructure in place so that you have a benefit sharing plan from forest carbon. So the money you get from that price of carbon flows down to the farmers. so that if the government wants to encourage people, there is social infrastructure to hook into, so that every project doesn't have to create new infrastructure, new methods of dispersing money that costs more money, so you're wasting some of that concessional finance. Indonesia, again, has done this almost better than anybody else in terms of setting up community associations and that social infrastructure to flow money, not just from the national budget, but from carbon markets, from donor financing, and it works. Social infrastructure works. And then finally, Kristin, I'll end on this one. Digital infrastructure matters. If we don't have a monitoring, reporting, and verification system that's solid, that's underpinned by really strong data, nothing will work. The GCF isn't going to put money behind something when they don't know how much bang are they going to get for their buck. And they shouldn't put money in. So having that digital infrastructure works. An individual farmer is not going to be convinced to change what they've always done for a generation unless they're able to see through measurable data that they will have more money in their pocket at the end of the day. And we need to link up their access to data to national systems, because again, having that kind of information technology infrastructure so that we are proving that the money is being put to work and that the people we are working for are better off at the end of the day. And that's yet another lesson from Lao PDR.
Thank you, and you can keep the mic. So you've given these experiences. Now, how do you use these insights, when you're talking about new projects to design or scale up projects? So I think one thing that's important that people come away with, a modal shift in the mentality and the approach, how do you make it happen, in designing and scaling up projects?
So just a couple of weeks ago at the GCF board, the GCF kindly approved another one of our project called Amazon Viva for here in the Amazon Basin. And it's a project that's very similar to the project that was done through GIZ in Laos in 2020. And it's taking all of the lessons, not just from Lao PDR, from the work we've done in Indonesia, from the work we've done across Africa, to really think through how do we create that capital stack? How do we make sure this isn't one more input-based project that isn't linked to the long-term development and isn't linked to measurable results? And we're making sure that this project is not just about the environment. Yes, it's an environment project. Yes, it's a climate project. That's why the GCF exists. It demands of us that we prove there will be measurable emissions avoided, and there will be. But we also have to prove for our board that there will be measurable improvements in the livelihoods of the almost 60 million people who live in the Amazon basin. I mean, we find it incredible that in the Amazon basin, the same as in the forests of Lao PDR, in the forests and at the coasts of Indonesia, some of the world's most financially stressed people are living amongst the world's most rich nature. And it's not okay that we've asked those people to forgo their development to save nature. And so Amazon Viva, this program we have with the generosity of the GCF, is exactly going to help link to our financing and help with other development coordination in the region so that we can really sit down and have a long-term investment, building on what's already been done, to deliver for climate and for environment while managing expectations. Because it's the other lesson we've learned very much from our work watching what happened in Laos, being involved across the world, is we have to manage expectations around investments in forestry. They take a while. They are often exposed to other challenges that are outside of project's control, whether it's macroeconomic changes. In the Amazon, for example, changes in the price of beef and the price of soy changes what farmers think about in terms of what actions they want to take that'll put money in their pockets. It's still one of the most dangerous places to work and to invest is in forest areas. We know, unfortunately, the almost 200 people who have died just in the past year defending nature. And so when we add money into these spaces, we want to make sure we're managing the safety of the people who have to spend this. And these are the sorts of lessons. But again, it's about making sure that the Amazon Viva project, for example, is part of this capital coordination, linking up with everybody else, linking with other development partners, being led by the countries and using existing social infrastructure. So we're not creating something new, but we're using existing plumbing. So long after the GCF money has been invested, the results will continue to accrue.
As the Regional Director for Latin America, I thank you for mentioning that project, which, by the way, we were able to use the efficient GCF, and within 9 months we were able to go from the concept to the board approval and the signature. So I think it was quite an accomplishment. So I appreciate you mentioning that project. And I think the important role with indigenous populations, that it's really, you know, thought out in a manner which is inclusive. And lastly, I'd like to say, you know, they joke that it's Amazonia viva forever. So the cooperation with IDB, the fact that you have an MOU with IDB, that you're looking in an inclusive manner to avoid duplication and really working together, bada bangs.
And not just, no thank you, it's our collective parabens, but it's not just IDB. I mean, it's also CAF who works in the Amazon basin, it's also Germany and Norway who have been enormous contributors as development partners. But most importantly, it is the local indigenous organizations, it's ACTO, the regional intergovernmental body, and it is the various ministries in each of the countries of the Amazon basin who are responsible for delivering on this. Because I think increasingly the projects we all have together as development partners are one small piece of the larger ecosystem, and we need to make sure our piece fits in the bigger picture and doesn't exist independently.
Thank you. With the experience with GIZ, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of the design or scaling up of projects that we can take into consideration for the future to deliver that impact and not just, as we were talking, just outputs?
Perhaps on the social side that Valerie just mentioned, so it's not only about the incentive payments really for nature conservation or the demarcation. Of course, we could also speak about law enforcement, very important topic also here in the Amazon region. But I would like perhaps to speak a little bit more about what does actually a villager moves to get on board. And you can imagine perhaps if those new practices and the new income opportunities or business, they may actually perhaps at the beginning not necessarily trust those that come in from the government, from the national authorities, and tell them, look, you should do it differently. So not everywhere actually this trust is already available, so that you think, okay, I get on board immediately, it sounds nice, very innovative, they promise a higher income, but what happens if I do fail? So I mean, this is a risk that they have to take. Even if a higher or a better livelihood is being promised. So I think what we have learned in those types of projects, regardless whether you deal with the forest issues, you have to create trust, give them time. Change doesn't happen overnight. Stay engaged, listen carefully to farmers, to villagers. So what are the risks that they see? What worries them profoundly? Secondly, I mean, in this specific project in Laos, actually, there was a built-in incentive at the village level, really also some financial smaller grants to change actually, to invest in different income opportunities. But it was attached to actually the formation of villages groups. So they had to sit together, so they had to strengthen the community. So this was not a model where you would say individuals benefit only, but it was also done in a way that, I mean, the community was incentivized to sit together, to work together. And by doing so, I think also you increase the type of social control, no? If things are not being observed properly, etc. So I think this type of really working on more resilient communities, giving them an incentive to sit together, work together, is something that has paid off in accordance to our experience on the ground.
Thank you. You can keep the mic. I have another question for you. You're not. So, you know, you've talked about one element of transformational change, the long term. So after the GCF funding is no longer there, is there any other support that you can give to the countries to help sustain this transformational change over the long term?
Well, I hope that actually, well, we have it still ongoing. I mean, one of the mechanisms, of course, could be the TFFF. The TFFF was created precisely so that after you really mobilize the type of endeavor that you need to get access to the different sources, and now we have done the bridging with the GCF and the German funding, but in the long run, we need a system that would really, in a very robust manner, incentivize actually those environmental services, would pay for those environmental services that nature and forests actually provide globally. Regardless whether those forests are in Laos or they are in Brazil or they are in DRC. So yeah, this would be one funding model. Quite frankly, I think it's a brilliant idea. And apart from this, I think from one of our many global endeavors, I think I'm very much in favor of those that are pleading that we get a more steady income source. For instance, like for the Fund for Loss and Damage, because partially when these, actually the protection of these global public goods, if they depend on yearly budgetary decisions that governments take, I mean, this is not commensurate with the challenge. So we have to put a financing scheme in place that is really commensurate with this long-term endeavor that we have to pursue. And nowadays we still are like in shorter cycles. So, and we see ups and downs in funding streams. And I think that the TFFF is a very important step into the right direction. More has to come, I think, in order to make sure that the broad agenda from adaptation to mitigation to nature protection gets properly funded.
Thank you. Now I'd like to move to Indonesia. You've heard the perspectives of the World Bank and GIZ. From the point of view of the country, how does it land what we've been discussing? What do you see that is missing that will sustain the transformational change over the long term?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to the German pavilion. Yeah, regarding the missing link, I think for the countries like Indonesia, maybe the first time we would like to introduce the IF first. So Indonesian Environment Fund is a financial mechanism under the Ministry of Finance. We are mandating to manage environmental fund. And at this point, we apply some financial instrument covering grant and also revolving fund, as well as endowment fund. So at this point, when we would like to develop like financial ecosystem for the whole ecosystem program, sometimes it is not easy because let's say right now maybe some countries like maybe least developed countries and also others still need to increase their capacity, and some other already move to the higher level. So how the donor or international partner can develop the countries with the different condition, like Indonesia maybe right now we also would like to develop a kind of blended finance, because we can say we already got a lot of support from the international partner, like to strengthen the capacity of the community surrounding forest area. And right now we also would like to move how we can increase their capacity to support them to have like higher or scale up their business. So it means we have to mobilize the private funds at this point, and then we would like to develop a blended finance. So sometimes it is not easy how we can mobilize the private funds. So that's why international partner also important to support the countries how we can engage with the private sector at this point. So I think this is important as well. So the missing links like that.
Thank you. And I'm going to give you a magic wand. So the magic wand is, how can climate finance be better designed and mobilized to support smallholders, indigenous people, forest-dependent communities in scaling up sustainable forestry practices? So you have a magic wand. What is it that is needed?
Yeah, the magic one, yeah, as I mentioned. So when we talk about the certain program, we cannot talk only one spot. So we have to develop like financial ecosystem at this point. So we are starting from the downstream to the upstream. Yeah, as I mentioned that, let's say, for example, using result-based payment from GCF and also result-based payment from the FCPF, the World Bank, we use the fund to strengthen the capacity and also to strengthen other enabling condition of the community and also other community, how they can get permit from the government to manage the forest for 35 years. And then after they got permit, they also should develop like social forestry or community-based business plan. And at this point, IF provide grant using the fund from the GCF and also from the World Bank, for example, and upcoming will be collaborate with GIZ to access the fund from GCF as well for one provinces in Indonesia. And then after that, after they have like business plan of social forestry or community-based program, they will running their business, right? And then at this point, IF also can support them by providing revolving fund coming from the state budget. So it means we not only depend on the partners, but we also provide fund from a state budget. And then after they can access the revolving fund, they increase the capacity, and then at the end, we do hope the community group, including the other community, can develop their business and scale up their market. How? Of course, IF as a financial mechanism have to support them. So right now we under process to develop blended finance to attract the private finance, and maybe initially right now we also under process using GCF fund. Maybe later on, if it is approved by the GCF, it will be pricing. We would like to develop like collective investment undertaking. So we will put green project as underlying project, and then we will offering like interesting return to the investor, such as carbon maybe later on, or maybe in cash as a return to the investor. And then after that, yeah, if the project is done or maybe can reach the target, and then the investor will get the return like a carbon, and then the community will get the fund from the investor. So hopefully this kind of the blended scheme later on can work in Indonesia. But at this point, because IF is public agency, of course we will work together with the manager investment in Indonesia later on. So this is kind of how we develop financial or financing ecosystem starting from the downstream to the upstream. So we have some financial instruments starting from the grant revolving fund, and then at the end we will mobilize the private funds. So I think that's all from our side.
Thank you, and you used the wand along the whole stream, so that was very, very creative. Valerie, from the World Bank perspective, hearing all these great ideas, revolving fund, all these different areas where it makes sense for the individual farmer to make this modal shift. Is there any other ideas that you have in terms of what would make climate finance better be designed for the perspective of the small holders?
Our dream at the World Bank is to make available at lower cost and longer tenors money that is executed quickly. Because the cost of capital is too high. It takes too long to access it. It takes too long to get it. I just came from a conversation with Rwanda and the Rwandan Green Fund, and one of the challenges is a thin pipeline, and for investors, this inability to quickly get to financial close. And you put all of this together, and we have to start asking ourselves, in an environment with reduced overseas development assistance, with less concessional funding, how do we use it better? So it's the right question, Kristin. We have to look at exactly the entire financial ecosystem. And so for us, a couple of things really do come up. One, we have to defragment the climate finance architecture, because if I'm Zhong Yang, and forgive me again if I get this lady's name wrong, I apologize. She's never heard of the GCF or the World Bank or GIZ, and she shouldn't have to. And there should, and nor oftentimes do we have, even at the ministry level, even at ministries as sophisticated as a middle-income country like Indonesia, do they know which of the climate funds should they be going to? When should they be asking for World Bank money? When should they be asking for GCF money? When should they go to the GF? Why can't we have a one-stop shop? Put the onus of figuring out which money is best placed on us and not on Zhongyang, or not on her local collaborative, or not on the Ministry of Environment or the Ministry of Finance in that country. We have to defragment and we have to disintermediate. Unfortunately, we have an awful lot of people who, for a long time, it made sense to have a consulting ecosystem and an NGO ecosystem, particularly foreign NGOs working in countries, but we haven't done enough to ensure that they sunset, that they build local capacity, so that you don't forever need international NGOs, international ecosystems helping intermediate access to these funds, because that takes away some of the money. So instead of it going to Pyongyang, it goes to some consultant from Ireland, for example, my country, and there's less money available for Pyongyang to absorb the risk of failure when she changes what she does. So if we can defragment, and if we can disintermediate and make sure more of the money goes locally, then I think we begin to have that social infrastructure, the financial ecosystem that moves the money at the right price and the right tenor quickly to where it needs to go to have a measurable impact.
Thank you. And I hope that we have an event on Saturday on country platforms, that the country platforms is one way that the countries have the driving seat and can try to ensure that everyone is cooperating in an effective manner and avoiding the duplication for that. So thank you for those ideas. And you have a magic wand too? You can have one too.
Yeah, I think it goes partially in similar direction, although I wanted to really underline one specific point. I mean, in the past also, I very much believe in efficiency and that there is, of course, too much fragmentation in the system. But on the other hand, I think what is out there as a criticism vis-a-vis the whole financial entities is that they are not really listening to the demand that is being expressed either at the governmental level, at the municipal level, or at the level of the villages. And I think that actually this new model that was introduced by the GCF, and I know that many countries fought for it, the direct access entity, this is a completely new concept. Of course, you have designated authorities, they have to be capacitized, but then you have actually somebody there in country that can really be like the counterpart, and by doing business with all the different, with the GCF, I think they are also figuring out what is best for them. And I think we really have to localize also these streams and these work streams, and it's going to pay off. This is my firm belief, so what I've seen so far. I wanted to add this additionally.
No, I appreciate that you mentioned that, and just as a shout out, GCF also has readiness support for direct access entities, and the first entity to benefit from that is here in Brazil. So it is important to capacitate the direct access entities, and we're seeing really the country focus, really trying to decide, what you're trying to achieve, how the private sector plays a role in the public sector, and then the last thing is who's best placed to actually implement it. So the capacity building that entities such as the World Bank play with these direct access entities is most appreciated. I'd like to close with one final question for everyone, which you alluded to the fact that and you can go first, that the current political landscape is a little bit volatile. And so what are the opportunities and barriers that we need to think about in accessing and mobilizing climate finance to really drive the transformational change in forest conservation and management?
Yeah, this is a hard question. I think from our opinion, this is not easy, but we also can starting how we can also shifting our concept how the conservation can do. Because when we would like, maybe in some countries conservation is conservation. They cannot, when we talk about the conservation, we cannot left behind the community, right, in surrounding the forest area. So it means the most important thing how we can maintain the community surrounding forest area when we talk about the conservation. And then after the community surrounding forest area can increase their welfare and also other things, of course, automatically the conservation measure can also increase, I think, at this point. So it means that we can starting how the conservation from the buffer zone at the end into the central zone of the conservation area. Because in Indonesia, like Indonesia, when we talk about the conservation area, it means the area cannot be attached with other activities. So this is the concept of conservation in Indonesia. So a bit different maybe with other country. So we cannot talk, the conservation itself, but we also have to talk about the community surrounding forest area. I think that's all from our side. Thank you.
Thank you. If Valerie, if you can come in. Valerie, if you can come in with the perspective of the World Bank, is there anything that you would like to add to what was said?
I thought there was a disco next door. I thought we were going to join.
Yeah. Sorry, we're
Forgive me. You know what's interesting? I think there's an upside to the current political and financial moment when there's less money available and the traditional development partners. In that we have to open our eyes a little bit wider and see the money that's already being spent on forests. Forests are incredibly lucrative money-making investments, and I don't mean the bad stuff that's done in forests. It's the reason why smallholder farmers themselves, some of the poorest people on the planet, invest together $1 billion a day in putting trees on farms and thinking about how to manage their own forests and linking them up with neighbors' forests. It's $1 billion a day in smallholder farmers. We've got big business working in forests in terms of sustainable forest management to feed a market that's worth over $800 billion a year. There's big money in sustainable forest management. So there's a lot of money, private capital already flowing. And one of the roles for the reduced amount of concessional finance that is available is not to substitute for private capital. We don't need to put our money where the private sector, whether it's a smallholder farmer or big business, are already going to put their money. Think about nature-based tourism and the amount of money people are willing to put in to their local nature, their local forest, because they're getting a lot of money out of it. We need to use concessional finance in exactly those places where we can make the biggest difference, where otherwise it won't happen. That includes, for example, nudging, subsidy, repurposing. If smallholder farmers are spending $1 billion a day, governments are spending $2 billion a day in agricultural subsidies that are driving deforestation. The same amount of money could be used and put in the pockets of the same farmers so they don't lose money, but instead of using it to put more nitrogen fertilizer on their soils, which is not increasing productivity anymore because they're over-fertilized, and is leading to health issues in it, particularly the children who are often putting the fertilizer on the land, you could use this to drive conservation and reap the dividends and the productivity gains from nature-based approaches to landscape management and productivity. So I think concessional financing shouldn't be substituting for private capital where it already is, and should be used for those smart buys that will nudge policy in the right direction, that will build the capacity and build the plumbing so that long after whatever concessional finance us development partners provide, long after we're gone, the systems and the plumbing will continue to deliver government financing and private financing for the men and women, for the young Chang and her family for many years to come.
Thank you. The final word goes to GIZ.
Well, I think obviously, I think we are going to see the impact of reduced public funding over time. And in some sectors it's already quite obvious. And I think that perhaps also here the voices are more loudly, but perhaps in mainstream politics, perhaps not yet, that they are going to realize if they invest less into nature conservation, into people, into sustainable development, it will not pay off. To the contrary, but they are really running big security risks because the climate crisis is going to haunt them. And which means that, frankly, for each and every dollar that you don't spend now, I mean, in order for reforestation, for sustainable development, you're going to pay much more money simply after extreme weather events that hit a community or an urban area or a bigger settlement, simply for the repair of all this damage. So hopefully this awareness is raising. I see a lot of movement within the private sector, quite frankly, because they realized, for instance, when you reach a certain tipping point of deforestation, in specific areas that are, for instance, very important for the water sources, water is not only life, but it's in many cases you're going out of business if you don't have water. So reforestation makes a lot of sense. And they are starting to invest into watershed management systems, into providing incentive systems to farmers, because it's in their own business interest. And I see a lot of change in this respect. And I think if we could take those companies as a role model to incentivize others, so more money is going to, not as a substitution for the public funding that should be continued, that should be increased in any case, but as a complement, but especially because these private sector entities can have a big voice in convincing politicians that we have to invest more in really conserving the forest, in helping farmers and local communities to play their specific role in this endeavor. That's my hope.
Thank you. We had a recent example in Latin America where the one city, 30% of the GDP is from the city, and they were having to ration water. And so this point of the nature-based solutions, so that the city will have water, it makes business sense for all. So thank you for that. We're going to be closing with a video, so please don't, I'll make the final remarks, but stay for the video because it's worth it. I want to end by just extending my gratitude. It's the first time in an all-female panel, by the way, so I'm happy for that. For your insights and contributions. And I really, I leave this panel with a positive, hope that we will be able to put some of these ideas into place. We're going to deliver with Amazonia Viva. Going to hold you accountable for that, and to really see, how we can really be transformational in this area. As we mark the 10th anniversary of GCF's operationalization, it has been truly meaningful to reflect on how our forest management projects have made an impact and expand our discussion on climate finance in the forestry sector. We appreciate, again, your insights that you have shared, and I hope that we'll be able to see them put into practice. Today's discussion has reaffirmed that forestry stands at the very core of the global climate agenda, serving not only as one of the most powerful carbon sinks, but also as a cornerstone for sustainable livelihoods, biodiversity, and climate resilience, safeguarding the flow of ecosystem services that we're also dependent on. We must urgently address the challenges we face and drive transformational change that ensures resilient, sustainable livelihoods and long-term climate security. We have also underscored the crucial role of climate finance in driving systemic change. Our planet urgently needs it. Scaled and well-directed climate finance is essential to catalyzing structural shift in forest protection, restoration, conservation, and sustainable management, empowering countries and communities that heavily depend on the forest. Strategic investments are crucial to maximize the impact of climate finance, unlocking the potential for long-term systemic change. In light of this need, GCF, the largest multilateral climate fund, has delivered and mobilized finance at scale over the past decade to unlock the full potential of forests. From 2015 to 2025, including our last board, where we got Amazon Viva approved, GCF has approved 92 forest projects, mobilizing $2.3 billion in GCF financing and USD 3.6 billion in co-financing. There was 700 million from World Bank and the Amazon Viva. Already 21 projects under implementation have achieved tangible impacts. We had the example today, reducing 36 million tons of CO2, benefiting 284 million people, and protecting and restoring 1.7 million hectares of forest. These interventions have shown that forest-based solutions can deliver significant mitigation and adaptation benefits, creating the great opportunity to tackle climate change. Looking ahead, GCF remains deeply committed to work in close partnership with a wide range of global networks. Today, the fund works in over 140 countries through 158 AEs and continues to expand in the network to broaden access and maximize impact. By supporting direct access entities, reinforce country ownership, enable climate action alignment with national priorities, and enhance institutional and technical capacity, which we were discussing. The flagship Efficient GCF, which is what approved Amazon Viva in 9 months, has expedited the process by streamlining the approval. To accelerate progress, we must act collectively and decisively, leveraging finance, knowledge, and innovation to protect and restore the world's forests. By deepening our collaboration, aligning our efforts, and scaling investments where they're most needed, we can ensure that our forests continue to sustain our planet, our people, and future generations. So I would like everyone to wait for the video, but I really appreciate you suffering through the heat to discuss this very important topic.
สบายดีข้าพเจ้าชื่อสายแล้วก็ข้าพเจ้าเฮ็ดเวียกให้ทางโครงการคิดแพ็ก IGFL GZ เนาะแล้วให้พี่ซอเกี่ยวกับเรื่องที่ปรึกษาเกี่ยวกับเรื่องป่าไม้แล้วก็เรื่องการวางแผนนำใช้ที่ดินเนื่องจากว่าบ้านก็มีแนวความคิดที่ว่าอยากปกปักรักษาป่าไม้แล้วก็อยากปรับปรุงชีวิตก็เป็นอยู่ตัดสินใจว่าเขาจะร่วมมือกับโครงการจะร่วมมือกับการจัดตั้งปฏิบัติโครงการนอกหลังจากนั้นเขาก็มีการวางแผนนำใช้ที่ดินร่วมกับบ้านแล้วเป้าหมายหลักๆของโครงการเฮาในการหันเปลี่ยนอาชีพแบบเฮ็ดให้เลื่อนลอยมาเป็นเฮ็ดให้คงที่หรือว่าก็เพื่อการลุกพรถ่ายพิษเหือนแก้วจากการทำลายป่าไม้เนาะแล้วก็จากการบุกรุกป่าอยู่ในเขตที่ห้ามหรืออยู่ในเขตป่าสงวนอยู่ในเขตป่าป้องกันแล้วก็ป่าสมไส้ที่เฮากำหนดเป็นป่าผ่านมามันค่อนข้างว่าเขาอยากปกปักรักษาอยู่แล้วแต่ว่าเนื่องจากว่าการปรับปรุงชีวิตกับเป็นอยู่ของชาวบ้านยังบ่ได้เท่าที่ควรนั่นละลายโครงการแล้วเพราะฉะนั้นการพัฒนาเขตชนบทสำคัญเขาต้องสามารถเอาเขาไปเห็นกับตาเขาเองแล้วเขาจะลงมือเฮ็ดเอง
ว่าก่อนที่ของการบุทางเข้ามาบ้านเฮาที่ว่าการไล่ฮัดที่ว่าบ่ได้มีเนาะว่าที่ว่าก็มีการปกปักรักษาป่าไม้อยู่ในบ้านเฮาหลังจากนั้นโครงการมาเบิ่งจะว่าบ้านก็ปฏิบัติได้แล้วโครงการได้เข้ามาแล้วมีได้ลงทุนให้พ่อแม่ประชาชนช่วยปกปักรักษาพัฒนาบ้านให้มีการพัฒนาปกปักรักษาป่าไม้ให้มีความงดงาม บ่มีไม้จะที่ว่าจะมาใช้ให้อันสิ้นลูกสิ้นหลังเฮาหรือว่าในอนาคตตัวหน้าเนาะแต่ว่าปัจจัยสำคัญที่สุดที่ว่าเฮาอยากปกปักรักษาป่าไม้ตัวนี้ที่ว่าเราคิดว่าในอนาคตตัวหน้านี้จะ